Today's guest on the podcast is Sarah Ban Breathnach. Her book, Simple Abundance, topped the New York Times bestseller list for over 2 years and spent its time at number 1 for one of those years. It's been translated into 28 languages and has sold over 5 million copies in the U.S. alone. Never once has this book been out of print, and it attracts new fans, new women, to its 2 signature concepts, which are now part of the American vernacular, the gratitude journal and the term authentic self. I know that I have really, really enjoyed getting to read this book, and this is the first time I've read it, and it is a beautiful, beautiful book. And it has a companion, the Simple Abundance Journal of Gratitude, which I am all for gratitude journaling, and I had no idea that Sarah was essentially the founder of this concept. She has been on Oprah. Actually, her gratitude journal book is dedicated to Oprah with love. And we talk about that a little bit at the beginning of the episode. But I truly enjoyed this interview. She is such a delight. And I am proud to have all of you have the opportunity to listen to her story and her wisdom. And I am, for one, very grateful to her for her time. So I hope you all enjoyed this episode with Sarah Ban Breathnach. Hi, and welcome to the Same 24 Hours podcast. I'm Meredith Atwood, author of the book, The Year of No Nonsense. I'm a former attorney turned writer, speaker, and Ironman triathlete. Although right now, all I really like to do is lift weights. We all have the same 24 hours, but it's what we do in those hours that leads to our greatest health, happiness, and success. It's my goal to crack the code on a life of less nonsense so we can all make the most of our 24 hours. So let's get started. Today's guest, Sarah Ban Breathnach, is here. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Meredith. How are you?
So honored that you're taking the time to talk with me. I almost cried when I got an email about this, so thank you.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Yeah, I'm happy to do it.
Yeah, so very exciting news. Your book, Simple Abundance, which was on the New York Times bestseller list for over 2 years in, 1996, 97?
96 and 97,
is completely revised and updated 25 years later, and it is out, and it is beautiful. So congratulations on that.
Oh, thank you.
And
very kind.
I'll tell you, and also the Simple Abundance Journal of Gratitude. When I got the journal, I opened it up, and it said, "For Oprah with love." And so here's my story I was going to tell you.
Okay.
I love Oprah. I mean, I guess some people don't, but I don't know many. I really don't want to be friends with anyone who doesn't love Oprah. So I was in a store in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and I walked by, and they had a candle in the window that had Oprah on it. It's like a candle like you would light in a religious candle, but it had Oprah on it. And so I've been lighting my Oprah candle for many months since my book is coming out. And when I saw that your book was dedicated to Oprah with love, I was like, oh, that is some writing goals right there, to write a book and dedicate it to Oprah. I don't know. It just was great. And so I think, like, my little shrine, I'll put the Abundance Gratitude Journal next to my Oprah candle and, just have the vibe.
Well, I'll tell you a story about that. Simple Abundance, the original Simple Abundance, was turned down by 30 publishers in America over a 2-year process. And I kept writing, and that was really excruciating. But I kept writing the book. I kept showing up every day to write the book. So there was, just one moment where I actually just thought, how many times, I can't go over this. Some publishers were turning it down twice. So I thought,
oh man.
Okay. So I created a little mood board for myself, and we're talking 1993, and I made a mock-up of the New York Times bestseller list, and this was about 2 years, 18 months before it was even published. But I had put the date June 6, 1996, and I put Simple Abundance at #1 and everything. Made copies of them so that it looked to me like a New York Times bestseller list. Didn't look like a mock-up, whatever. I put it on the corner of my computer, and I would see it every day, and I'd acknowledge it every day. And miraculously, you want to say, but it's not. It was miraculous, but it was also many things. I beat my list twice by 2 months because Simple Abundance hit it in April of 1996.
So amazing. You wouldn't believe it if I told you, but my book coming out in 3.5 weeks on my phone right now, my good friend Jessica made me a screensaver. The Year of No Nonsense, New York Times bestseller.
Great.
She also bought me a candle to go next to Oprah's. But and that feels silly coming from me because I don't, I feel like you can tell that story now because you actually did it. But I have been writing that down for 2 years.
It's I know short.
I mean, I know it. If you don't believe it, no one else will. That's what I say.
That's right. I had also had my mock-up of like 4 famous people giving me blurbs.
Yes.
And so, and then I got a real blurb when it was just published, kind of thing. So I put it up on the wall, and my daughter's father said, "Oh, look, Katie, see how all of these people are just saying Mommy's book is so good." And I said, no, this is the real one. This is real.
Oh my gosh, I love it. But you know what is so amazing about you is this was not being done and practiced until, you were on the forefront. People were not talking about gratitude. No. In 1996. Now everything's like, be gracious, be grateful. Right. You hear it. But that wasn't a thing until you came along. So what inspired you? Like, lots of questions. How did you come to the place where you decided this is big enough for a book and I have to write this?
Well, I had written 2 books on Victorian family life, and I was supposed to start a third, which was on Victorian decorative details. And the very thought of the length of time that you spend with a book, like 2 years, and meditating on the meaning of ruffles and flourishes.
I was going to say, that's probably a tough one.
Oh, boy, I just couldn't do that. And but I didn't know what to write. And the thing, Meredith, I don't know if you complain in your head. I don't think a lot of women will complain other than maybe their family or a close friend or whatever. But we don't whine. But boy, I whined in my head. No one else knew it, but the great creator and I knew it.
Right.
And I could not figure out what I was doing wrong, because I'd had a nationally syndicated column with the Washington Post. I'd published 2 books. I could not figure out why I was connecting the dots, but I was getting nowhere. And finally, it was just another morning, getting my daughter off to school and everything else. And I heard a very strong and gentle but very instructive voice that said, "You're going to sit down at this dining room table. You're not going to get up until you give me 100 reasons why you are grateful for your life exactly as it is now." Wow. And money can't be there, because that was the underlying crux. Was that this was during 1993. We were in a bad recession. Mm-hmm. People were being laid off in the thousands. Every day it was just doom and gloom. And I picked up on that. I'd had a couple of consulting jobs that were eliminated, and so money was a huge issue for me. And I was at the point of my life that if I could not if I could not attach a comma, or I could not attach a paycheck on whatever I did, it didn't count. So you have all of this ferment and this very, very needy and very angry. I mean, people are surprised, but I was angry, but I never said anything to anybody. Right. And then I did this list, and I looked at this list, and I thought, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Thank you. Oh, thank you. I'm so sorry. I didn't realize how blessed I was. So this wasn't an idea for a book. This was just an awakening, and I felt shameful, because how could I have so many blessings that other women didn't, and health, I mean, just everything. And so I started writing down every day, because it was a very new habit for me. Right. I started keeping notes and writing, five things to be grateful for. And because it was so new for me, the things would happen all the time, but I'd see how quickly they would disappear by the end of the evening. So I wrote them on Post-it notes. I wrote them on little index cards. I just wrote it down on a pad, And then I started collecting them in a journal that I called the Gratitude Journal. And after I had worked with gratitude, it still wasn't a book, but after I had worked with gratitude for about a little over 2 months, my internal world was completely different. Yes. Yes. Nothing had happened on the outside that would show any difference. I didn't get a job. Nothing happened, but I happened. And I was seeing the world not as the world was, but as I was becoming. And that's when I thought, oh my God, people have it wrong about downshifting. They're not losing. They can be gaining, because the process of simple abundance, and again, it wasn't a book. The process of simple abundance is that with the 6 graces, I call them 6 principles or 6 graces, because they really do feel like creative and spiritual graces. Gratitude came in first, and then the soul was ready to divest. And when that's when simplicity said, can I come in for a chat? Yeah. And then you pare down, and the will cannot pare down for you, but the soul can divest for you, and you don't miss what you're giving up. And then order came. Confusion usually reigned. It was, neat on the surface, but chaos underneath. Right. And then harmony. Now, in 1995, harmony, I described harmony as the ability to hear the end of one's own thought, to hear the sentence finish.
Oh, wow. I like that. Which is why none of my sentences end. There's no harmony, right. Sarah.
That's right. And that was in 1995. And then beauty, and then joy. But it was very organic. There was nothing enforceable, if I didn't keep my gratitude journal because I got busy or I got sick, and believe me, this happens over the entire 25 years. I go a few days, and because I'm working so hard, and I want to think about my gratitudes as my head drops on the pillow and I pass out from fatigue. But that doesn't work. You really have to write it down, because we can't remember it.
Is that what it is? Because there's something too about pen to paper.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yes. Absolutely. So, do you keep a journal?
I do, and so it's so funny. I knew of you, but just speaking with you, I'm like, we're related. We're related, because a couple years ago, I started on this journey to just uncover a bunch of crap in my life. And I was like, I am not happy. Why am I not happy? And I started doing this process, and I just started, and I wrote. I've always been a writer, but kept a journal. And I used to not keep a journal as a kid because I knew my parents were reading it. And so I would write in it and tear out pages. And then I got really mad because I wanted to keep them. And so I always journaled but never kept them. And then I'm sure you know Julia Cameron morning pages about write 3 pages, throw them away. I'm like, well, I've done that my whole life.
Yeah.
No one would read it. But in 2017 is when I really started just putting pen to paper and not on my computer, because I thought, well, I could journal on my computer. No one will read it.
No.
But I got back to the basics, and I now carry a paper journal with me room to room.
Oh,
I mean, it's probably a way of me making sure no one reads it, but but I just encourage everyone to do that, because if something, and also with really like dark emotions, when you start to feel angry, like instead of going to the pantry, I go to the journal, and that helps.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. But that was the beginning. So after I had done about 6 months of the process, I said, I got it. The title came to me in neon letters, Simple Abundance. I called my agent, and then we had 2 years of being told no. 2 years of being told gratitude as a lifestyle choice. I don't think so,
And that seems so ludicrous now, right? Oh my goodness.
Oh my God. I know. But I feel so sorry I just want to give a hug to anybody who's trying to writing, because it is really, it's excruciating. It's sort of like, is there anything else in the world you could choose to do? Please tell me. An actress.
I thought that was being a lawyer, because I'm a lawyer. And so I quit law to be a writer, and I'm like, what am I doing? Did I pick like the 2 worst possible professions?
Yeah, that's what. But I knew I was onto something. I knew, and I just kept at it. I knew I had a message, and
so you didn't quit. How did you knew you had a message because it helped you?
Because it helped me.
Yes.
I thought if this Simple Abundance can turn your life around, then believe me, there's some woman. And Chris Tomasino was my agent, and still is, and she kept me going, because she started keeping. She'd only tell me like every 3 weeks, about. She'd group like 4 or 5 rejections. She didn't hit me every day. Thank God.
Oh, that's a good agent.
That was a good agent. And so so I'd cry myself to sleep, and then I'd say, okay, we'll give it one more shot. So it was all of that. So finally, my story quickly is. At Liv Bloomer was the editor, the acquiring editor at Warner Books, and she said she was one of the ones who turned it down twice, and but like on the 3rd time it came around, she said, and I was calling it Real Life, Knowing What You Love, Loving How You Live, and she said, I really like the title Simple Abundance, but here's the thing. She said, I wanted it to be a lifestyle book. Clarkson Potter was doing the most amazing, beautiful lifestyle books at the end of the 80s into the 90s. And I saw this as a lifestyle book. So it was very fixed in my intention, and fixed in everything else. And Chris called me one day and said, Liv Bloomer is interested in Simple Abundance. Of course, just couldn't believe it, a lot of shouting and everything else. She said, but she wants you to write it as a daily inspirational book for women. And I said, what? I said, that's preposterous. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. I said, how can I give inspiration to anybody else? Are you kidding? No. And Chris said, look, listen, will you just sleep on it? And so I said, yeah. I just thought this was ridiculous. But anyway.
Because, wait, had you written the whole thing?
I'd written at least over half of it. Okay. It would take me another 2 years to finish it.
Okay.
But I'd written, written all of the thing, and I imagined all the beautiful pictures that would go with it and whatever. So in the morning, I got up, and I had that disquiet that happens when, you're trying not to listen to intuition or heaven or whatever. And I said, all right, I'm just going to try to take material and break it up into daily, just see. And Meredith, I was so amazed by the power of the short. It was short and punchy, or short and comforting.
It's like the original blog.
It was.
Yeah.
And I talked about everything. I talked about everything in our lives. Dirty floors, over, the last 25 pounds that you can never lose.
Right.
The checking.
I love that you say 25 instead of 5. Because when I hear people say those last 5 pounds, I'm like, please, the last 25, and you just said 25. So true.
Yeah, okay. It's 25. Believe me, if I was down to 5, I wouldn't think I had to lose anything.
Right. But we would.
But yeah, I know. But I'm just saying, yes. Yeah. So, and then I wrote for another 2 years, and then it came out in 1995.
Well, there's some part of your story where you were, and I remember this from Super Soul with Oprah when I listened to it, but where you're talking about you wanted some Manolo Blahnik shoes, and you had to make a decision of, do I give up? Or, and I forget the story, so you may want to correct me, but I resonated with that so much, because at the time I heard that, I think it was on a podcast, I thought I was at the point of giving up. This was about 1.5 years ago, because I had quit the legal profession to pursue this book, and that's coming out. And I thought, I'm about to give up and go back to practicing law, because this is for the birds. Like, I thought law was bad. Writing is the worst. And I remember hearing that podcast, and I thought, okay, I always wanted those shoes, but now I just want a regular paycheck. So we'll just put the paycheck where the shoes are. But I remember you saying to yourself that if I give up, you talked about what that would be like for you. So can you kind of recount that story?
Sure. I had been living in England in the 70s, and writing about theater and fashion, fashion copywriter. And I had a portable typewriter. And Manolo Blahnik was this new young designer. This is about 74, just as Pret-a-Porter was starting to take off in London and Paris. But he had a little studio on Church Street, which is in Chelsea. And I would walk past it every day. And he only had like a little window, but excuse me, the window was like, it would be like the size if you were looking at, you could only see one pair of shoes.
Like a jewelry store.
Yeah, but it was even smaller. It was maybe 15 by 15 or 18 by 18, and with a glass. It was in a brick building where his studio was, and there would be one or two pairs of shoes, and I would go there every day as part of my daily devotional, and then came the crunch. I had a ticket with a return ticket, and to go home. I'd been away for almost 3 years, and I knew that if I went home, that I would hear, "We told you so." That would be one of the first things that would come out of everybody's mouth after saying hello. And I stood there, and I had my portable typewriter, and I could pawn the typewriter and stay and write, or I could pawn the typewriter and buy a pair of Manolo Blahniks to bring back with me. This is my choice. This is how life choices are made, Meredith.
Right. Shoes or typewriter. It's simple.
Choose Manolos.
Manolos, yes. Not just shoes.
Not just shoes.
Right.
So I stood there and I said, "Sarah, I promise you, if you don't go back, there will come a day when you can come back here and you can walk out with as many pairs of Manolo Blahniks as you want." And I said, okay. So I let the ticket elapse and kept the typewriter and continued writing.
What is it you that kept you going, though? I mean, you said that to yourself. You said, You, and I have that sort of voice too. I've always, and I think a lot of it came from my dad. Maybe when I was young, he always, and this is good and also toxic, but he used to say, you always want to live your life never having to look back and say, what if? And if you really take that literally, that will make you crazy, because every day has plenty of what ifs. But I've kind of taken that to the big tasks, you know. I don't want to look back and say, what if I didn't, you know, give this book a shot and I didn't, you know. So I've had that voice in my head. Where does it come from for you? Like, how did you know to just keep pushing?
Well, my father gifted me with another kind of double-edged toxic one.
They always
as long as we're comparing.
Let's do it.
Yeah. Look. And as I was growing up, he would say, you know, he was a big sports enthusiast. He was always watching some kind of game or whatever. And he would say, my nickname was Charlie. And he said, Charlie, he said, now the true champion makes it look easy. You have to make it look easy, Charlie. So that sent hackles on my goosebumps on my arms just to say that again. It's not enough that you achieve it. You have to make it look easy.
Wow.
And that that drives me crazy.
We have the same dad.
Yes,
I knew it. That's what it was. We have the same father.
Yes, that's right.
No, it's the same thing. And it's very masculine energy too. Like the fact he called you Charlie, right?
Right.
And my dad, my dad desperately wanted a son, a second son. He had a son, but he wanted another son. And when I wasn't a boy, I think he was just like, well, she looks like a girl, but we'll raise her like a man. Because he was just really tough on, you know, he raised me to be very tough. And it sounds like you had that too.
Yeah.
Which is good in a way. But it creates for difficulty when you have to sit down and figure out 100 things you're grateful for to survive, right?
But you know, they come pretty quickly. Yeah. Here's an example of just something that happened last week. I was putting garbage out into the trash barrel behind the apartment. And I had my keys, my house keys and everything, and they'd been in an apron pocket. And I walked in, and I always put my keys in the same spot so that it's habitual. That's where you look for your keys. And I didn't. And I thought, oh my God, I've lost my keys. Oh my God. And so I went back out and I combed the driveway and the parking spaces until I could get to the trash dumper. And there they were, and shining and with sunlight and golden. I mean, it was picture perfect. I said, oh, thank you, God. Thank you, God. Thank you. I found my keys. Because the end of that sentence is, the 3 days at least of complete disruption.
Right.
You know.
Right.
But if I hadn't written that down, I don't know that I would remember that, because I gave thanks at the time, but it's those little things. That's why, I write them on the Post-it notes, piece of paper.
It is the little things, and I'm sure this might have come from you now that we're talking, but the idea of daily practice, kind of meditation and gratitude, to allow the simple things that you do to really kind of wash over you and to meditate on them, like if you're washing the dishes and where this comes into play for me is when I'm looking at my children, and I love my children. They're 11 and 12, but they're also children. And sometimes, you're like, what are you thinking? What are you actually thinking? And I have a friend who said that boys' frontal lobes don't develop till they're 15, and that has made me
it's 25
feel,
actually.
It's 25.
Do you have two boys?
I have one boy.
But no, actually it's been proved a London neuro junkie. 25 is when their brain stops growing.
Have mercy. So, most of the time I just look at him and I think, frontal lobe, it's fine. It's going to be fine. But when I started this daily practice meditation, I tried it for a little bit. I remember looking at him, and of course I love this child. I love him.
Of course you do.
But
yes.
I looked at him and I really felt like for the first time in knowing him that I saw him. And what I mean by that is I looked at him and I was like, look at the way his little cow lick, in his head, and that precious head. And I just saw him as this just wonderful creature. And again, I loved him. I always thought he was wonderful, but it was like a depth of gratitude that I had not ever tapped into. And I feel that with your book, that every entry is just, you may think something on the outside, like, yes, of course I'm grateful for X, Y, and Z. But when you read Simple Abundance, you feel that just another notch. And that, I think, is the difference in having a good life and having a really great, peaceful life. That little nod.
Absolutely. And I think that the difference between this book, well, can I tell you how this, the 25th anniversary, it came about? I started receiving messages a couple of years ago. I've been very blessed that Simple Abundance has never been out of print in its 25 years. So, I'm eternally grateful for that. But I started receiving messages from millennial and Generation X women who were saying that they picked up the pink book. That's what everybody called it. Picked up the pink book that their mothers loved and opened it, and whatever they read on that day really had a connection with them. And then they would get to the end of each month's chapter, and I'd have Joyful Simplicities, and it would be, write for a mail order catalog or watch a VHS tape.
Right.
And
a book on tape, right? A book on tape.
And they're completely pulled out. The spell is broken. Right. So they said, could you update it for contemporary women? And the 25th anniversary was coming, and Simple Abundance said, sure, here. And I made the creative mistake, but I realized it's actually the way creativity works. Of thinking that, this is very straightforward. I'm just going to go in. You laugh. Yeah, I hear you laughing.
I revised a book this year too. Yeah, I'm laughing out of sympathy. Yes.
Yeah, it's the need to know factor.
Right.
We don't need to know this until we're in the midst of the book.
To anyone out there who's working on a second edition, it's fine. It's fine. Go ahead.
So I started doing it, and I thought, oh my God, I have to go in. It's like restoring a house. Yes. You have to go in and, yes, this will be lovely, madam. But
like black mold. Oh no.
Yeah, we have to shore up the foundation before we can create that little sitting nook. And so, and I had a year to do it, and it was the hardest but the happiest writing I've ever known. So, but it was hard, and
I can't imagine. So I had the second edition of my triathlon book out in March, and it was only 6 years old. But so I can't imagine 25 years. And my editor, I wrote the first book in 2011, and when she got her hands on the book, she's like, okay, so it's part 1 and part 2, right? And I said, yes. And she goes, okay, so we're going to cut part 2. Like, what? You're just going to take it out? And she's like, it's too long. And I thought, oh my gosh, so just right from the get-go, it was like the demo team, Yeah, we're just going to take off your top story.
Yeah, that's right. Trust us, you'll like it.
It'll be fun. And it was, but I know, I understand. I don't understand what 25 years of revision would feel like, but I do.
Well, I'm trying to think of that Charles Dickens character, Miss Havisham, who lives, in the room with all the cobwebs. It was just.
Is that A Tale of Two Cities?
No, I think it's Great Expectations.
Oh, Great Expectations, yes.
Yeah, but there I was. So we did it, but as I did it and I got into it and everything else, I became aware of the biggest differences in these two books, which is why I think of Simple Abundance now, which I call for the 21st century. But its real name is 365 Days to a Balanced and Joyful Life. Um, I like a little turbo jet because that's really what we need, But I that harmony, you can't hear yourself think. You cannot. I mean, what we exist in today's brutal, constant, stressful, 24/7 breaking news, and the social media culture, corrupting culture. It's because it's a mirage. I mean, what we are living through is and is being called the new normal. So this is where I take my little soapbox or whatever you want to
Let's go.
stand up and I want to say, all of this. Think of the thing. Whatever every day we're embedded with some reporter around the world with a harrowing natural disaster or gun violence or evacuations or flood. I mean, it's always, and we're like lassoed to the media that we're seeing it through, and it's our heartstrings. But we can't do anything to help these strangers in dangers. So all it does is stun us with sorrow, and makes it difficult for us to connect with our own families, with our own friends, with our own soul. And that would be one thing. But to have people say this is the new normal, I want to say, wait a minute, this is not normal. This is not normal. And we have to stop saying that. And we have to create boundaries, psychological, emotional, physical, spiritual, creative boundaries for the things that are precious to us, our families, our work. You cannot turn the television on the first thing before anything else. I feel, sometimes I get this image that, when we're in the kitchen and we're waiting for the coffee to perk, or we're checking email, and we're checking the news to see what happened overnight. And now everybody's off to school and we're getting ready. And suddenly we are feeling vibrations. We're feeling the flight or fight energies. And it reminds me of the prairie dog mother, the mother who lifts her head out the hole and is trying to gauge the buffalo stampede miles to minutes by the vibrations. And that's what we're like as we stand in our own kitchen.
Yes.
And nothing's happening. But that's what we are being trained that that everything is happening to us. So that was a real difference.
That's when true.
Yeah, it is, sadly. But this is what we all need to combat it. But we need to recognize that it's happening. That's the first thing. And then the second thing that I did in Simple Abundance, my 21st century version, is we now know that emergencies happen every day. And we need to do something to help us prepare for emergencies. And I call it becoming Mrs Miniver. That's my mantra. Mm-hmm. And have you ever seen that movie, Mrs Miniver, with Greer Garson?
No, I don't think so.
You're gonna love her. You're gonna love her. It's so. I've known for a long time that I needed to do emergency preparedness. Just get all the documents in one place and get the health records and so I had these disaster books kind of thing, and I couldn't read them, Meredith. I'd open it up and I'd be having a panic attack just reading what they're talking about. Mm-hmm. So I shut it and then I wouldn't think about it. But what I did do was I would go and watch Mrs Miniver again. And I had discovered Mrs Miniver after 9/11. And my daughter had just enrolled in NYU, and we were in the city. And I was asked, because of the original Simple Abundance, to offer some wisdom and comfort. And, I just felt really I needed a role model. And that's when I discovered Mrs Miniver And she became that for me because the archetype of Mrs. Miniver, of a woman trying to protect her family, the things that are precious to her, very calm, mother courage, with the English expression, keep on and carry on. And she was always, I can watch, I don't know how many times I've seen it now, but I can always pick up something new, a new nuance. So I thought, well, what if you just did it every month? And so that's what I did, because, women for centuries have had what they call a caution closet, where they have the extra candles and and
that's my husband. He's a prepper.
Oh,
you really
lucked out.
But he scares me. He was getting we have prep bags in our car, right? And last night was the annual cleaning out of the prep bags to put in clothes that fit the children and new tools and weapons, And he got that out, and he's telling my daughter, our daughter, he's got the map out and the compass, and he's telling her how to read a map and a compass. And I'm like, oh my gosh, why does she need to know that? But I mean, she does. But,
she
zombies, right?
But oh wow, yeah, you've got a prepper. That's that better go on your gratitude list.
But he gets so mad when I say this on the podcast. He's like, you're never supposed to tell someone you have supplies, because in the end times they'll come to your house. And I'm like, oh my gosh.
Don't give your address away.
I know. Oh my. It's so funny. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So, but that's, I've sort of, I sneak it in. It's sort of, and it's done, I think, so gently that nobody will be afraid as we get, but, so those are really the two differences. The soul of Simple Abundance is intact, and, the mess, all we have is all we need. All we need is the awareness of how much we have at any one moment. And
I love it so much. And I'm so grateful to you, because I have no proof of this, but I kind of feel like you were the founder of gratitude for at least, the modern world. Because when I started reading this, I thought, wait a minute, this has been going on since 1995. Why did I think gratitude was new? Sarah started this whole thing. So I love it. And I love the journal, the Simple Abundance Journal of Gratitude. So just so many congratulations to you.
Oh, thank you. You're very kind. I've loved talking to you.
Well, and I have one more question.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So this podcast is called The Same 24 Hours, meaning that we all have the same 24 hours in our day, which someone pointed out is not necessarily true, because some places don't have daylight savings time. And I said, this is too much for me. We're not going to talk about this. But regardless, generally, we all have the same 24 hours. And what we do in those 24 hours is what leads to our greatest health, happiness, and success. So I would say probably for you, gratitude is a big thing. But is there something else that you do on a daily basis that has really made a difference in your life?
Yes, in that I try to allow a little time for I call it Shepherd's Hotel, which was a famous hotel in Cairo for over a century, and it's my metaphor for the undone and the dreams that I have. So I love women's history from the domestic sphere, because the magazine articles were never meant to be kept, and I will dip into some of my reserves for that, and that always makes me smile.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So it's being grateful and getting on, and really not being grateful in a very hard way at all, but just being thankful, and it opens you up to wonder. And so I try to, when the wonder is there, I try to hold it for a few minutes before something else comes away. But I love the creative brainstorming I do with my authentic self at Shepherd's Hotel. The season is just beginning. Seasoning in Cairo.
Yes. Oh, well, thank you so much, Sarah. This was wonderful.
Thank you, Meredith. It certainly has been fun. It's been fun. And I wish you great success on the launch of the Year of No Nonsense.
Thank
That
you
is
so
great.
much.
That is a book I need.
Well, I am more than happy to send you a copy. Thank you for joining me on this episode of The Same 24 Hours. Remember to rate, review, and share this podcast. It really matters. I appreciate it. See you next time.